I don't talk about this to anyone because I know they wouldn't believe me, but I need to confess it, at least here. Even if it sounds like the rambling of someone who's lost their mind. It began on an ordinary night in the oldest underground station in the city. I had missed the last official train, that much I'm sure of. I checked my watch again and again, 12:40 a.m. The service should have been shut down by then. The station was nearly empty, but it wasn't silent. There were echoes of footsteps in the tunnels, footsteps that didn't belong to me, and a faint, metallic hum, like someone whispering from far down the tracks. I should have left, but for some reason, I stayed. Maybe because I didn't want to walk miles back home, maybe because some part of me hoped, foolishly, that another train would come. And then, it did. At first, it was just a vibration in the ground, subtle, like a heartbeat pulsing beneath the concrete. Then came the wind, a cold, stale draft carrying the stench of rust and wet stone. I stepped closer to the platform's edge, convincing myself it was nothing. That's when I saw it. The train crawled out of the tunnel like something dragging itself from a grave. Old, rotting cars with windows glowing faintly green from within. No destination sign, no line number, just a hulking shadow of rusted metal sliding into the station. And inside, the passengers. Figures stood motionless behind the glass, too still to be alive, too silent to be human. Their faces were blurred by shadow, yet their eyes glimmered with a dull, unnatural light. Watching, waiting. The train screeched to a halt in front of me. Its doors yawned open with a metallic groan. No one got off. No one stepped on. Only silence, and that suffocating stench of iron and dampness seeping out into the air. I should have turned back. I should have walked away, climbed the stairs, and never looked back. But I didn't. Something inside me, whether it was exhaustion, curiosity, or something else entirely, pushed me forward. Not with reason, not with choice. More like compulsion. My foot crossed the threshold. Inside, the air was colder than the station outside, almost unbreathable. The aisle stretched ahead like a tunnel into nowhere. The passengers remained frozen in place. Some of them tilted their heads ever so slightly, following me, not with their bodies, just with their eyes. I sat down, trembling, my back pressed against the worn leather of the seat. That's when I noticed it. The walls of the car were damp, moist, breathing. The windows shivered with every vibration of the train, and in their reflection, I could see shapes that weren't mine, faces leaning too close, mouths moving silently, just out of sync with reality. Then, with a violent slam, the doors closed. The train lurched forward, carrying me into the blackness of the tunnel. And in that instant, I knew I had just made the worst mistake of my life. The train picked up speed, faster than any subway I had ever taken. Yet outside the windows there was no light, no tunnel walls, no stations flashing past, only endless blackness, as though we were plunging through a void. The silence was unbearable. No hum of machinery, no screech of wheels, just the low throb of something alive beneath the metal. And the passengers, they never moved. At first, I tried not to look at them, but I couldn't help it. The man across the aisle had his face turned toward me now. His skin looked waxy, colorless, like melted candle flesh. His lips parted ever so slightly, and a faint hiss escaped, like air leaking from a punctured tire. Another turned its head, then another. Their eyes reflected that dim green glow, empty and glassy, but locked on me with unshakable precision. My pulse hammered in my ears. I gripped the seat, ready to bolt to the door, but the aisle seemed to stretch longer than before, as if the train itself was reshaping, pulling me deeper into its guts. That's when I heard it. A whisper, low and wet, threading through the air. "You shouldn't be here." I spun around. No one had spoken. The sound had come from everywhere at once. The walls, the ceiling, maybe even inside my head. Then the lights flickered. For a fraction of a second, the passengers weren't seated anymore. They were standing, closer. Their shapes blurred, their limbs too long, their necks bending at impossible angles. When the light steadied, they were back in their seats, still staring. I felt sick. My throat burned with the metallic taste of blood and rust. My skin prickled as though 100 invisible fingers were brushing against me. I stumbled toward the next car, forcing the door open. The hinges screamed, echoing down the corridor, but I didn't care. I needed out. I needed. The next car was worse. The seats were empty, but the floor was smeared with wet footprints, leading in circles. Some small, some enormous, some clawed. The windows were pitch-black mirrors, and in their reflections, I wasn't alone. Figures crowded behind me, though when I turned, there was nothing there. The train jolted violently, throwing me to the ground. When I lifted my head, the aisle was no longer empty. They were there. The passengers. All of them, standing now, packed into the car, silent, breathing in unison. I froze, every nerve screaming. Their chests rose and fell together, a synchronized rhythm that made the walls pulse along with them. One stepped forward, its mouth stretched open far too wide, tearing at the edges of its face. Inside was not a throat, but a tunnel of darkness that seemed to swallow the dim green light. And then, in a voice that was many voices at once, it spoke. "You boarded the train that never existed, and it will never let you go." I stumbled backward as that thing stepped closer. The other passengers followed, their movements jerky, unnatural, like puppets tugged by invisible strings. Their faces no longer blurred. They were clearer now, grotesquely clear. Skin stretched thin, lips cracked, eyes sunken but glowing with that faint green light. I pressed myself against the door, fumbling for the handle, but it wouldn't budge. The metal was ice cold beneath my palms, almost pulsing like it was alive. The figures drew nearer. Their breathing grew louder, filling the car with a nauseating rhythm, like lungs full of stagnant water. My chest tightened, and I couldn't tell if the sound was coming from them, or if the train itself was breathing with them. Suddenly, all the lights flickered out. Darkness swallowed everything. For a second, I thought I had gone blind. Then, one by one, the passengers' eyes ignited in the dark. Dozens of glowing orbs fixed on me, unblinking. Something cold brushed my arm. A hand, fingers longer than they should be, curling around my sleeve. I screamed, yanking free, but another hand caught my shoulder. Another clamped around my wrist. They were touching me now, holding me, pulling me into their circle. And then, silence. No breathing, no movement, just the low hum of the train gliding through nothingness. One figure leaned down until its face was inches from mine. Its mouth opened, and instead of words, a sound spilled out, like a chorus of voices layered over each other, speaking in fragments I couldn't fully grasp. We never left. We never arrived. We never were. I tried to shut my eyes, but even then, I could still feel their gaze burning into my skull. The air grew heavier, suffocating. My ears filled with static. My heart thundered so loud it felt like it would burst. And just when I thought I couldn't take another second, the train screeched to a sudden halt. The doors slid open. What I saw beyond them wasn't the station. It wasn't any place I recognized. It was a tunnel of endless fog, lit by that same sickly green glow, stretching on forever. The walls seemed to pulse, slick and wet, like I was staring into the throat of some massive creature. The passengers released me at once. They turned in unison, stepping calmly off the train, disappearing into the mist without a sound. One by one, until I was the only one left. And then, from somewhere deep in the fog, I heard it. The sound of another train approaching. Only, there were no rails. The floor beneath me vibrated, the air grew colder, and I realized with horror that the train I had boarded was only the first. Something else was coming, something far worse. The doors began to close, trapping me inside again. And as the green glow dimmed, a single thought repeated in my head, over and over. I never should have boarded.